last year was the first year that the American lifespan decreased for the first time in, I think, ever. And that is probably going to be reflected in the rest of the world in the next 5 to 6 years.
Good morning, Dr. Olivia. Do you think you could explain a little bit about who you are and like what you've researched and what you're passionate about right now?
Yeah, so I'm an Australian medical practitioner. I have been outside of allopathic medicine, conventional medicine since 2018 or so. And I'm across like the longevity fields, biohacking, functional medicine, nutrition research, and then now I've kind of settled into what I think is mm, my specialty, basically, which is psychoneuroimmunology. And psychoneuroimmunology is like the hard science behind the soft science of mind-body medicine, basically. I still do complex chronic conditions, mystery illnesses, emerging syndromes. I'm a senior lecturer with the National Center for Neuroimmunology and Emerging Diseases in Australia. This is where we do mitochondrial issues, natural killer cell problems in chronic fatigue syndrome. And I've just come on as a lecturer with Georgetown University in DC, and I'm also a faculty lecturer with the Geneva College of Longevity Science. So when I do research, it tends to actually be in the emerging syndrome space, mast cell activation syndrome, POTS, hypermobility syndromes, mitochondrial issues. And I wrote a paper on it's like an ion channel, evolutionary conserved ion channel, that I'm putting more and more emphasis on, because at the moment, one of the talks that I'm giving is as in part as a national tour in Australia and New Zealand in July is about how the survival brain or the adaptive brain, when it's sort of afraid of all these different threats, how it's actually perceiving those threats through an evolutionary lens, and then how it's responding. And part of how it takes in these inputs is through these evolutionary conserved ion channels, right? So anyway, that's the research side of things. But yeah, I still see patients. I do a lot of scientific and medical advisory board stuff, industry and clinical and corporate consulting. So I do a little bit of everything because I'm a digital nomad. And I don't tell my boyfriend this, but I may or may not be afraid of commitment. So I kind of spread myself quite thin across a lot of different places, in part actually because I realized that it's actually important for me to do that, because I've been able to get quite unique insights into different industries and problems because of this. So my Rolodex is pretty good now, because all different conferences I go to and who I network with. But that actually winds up helping when it comes to trying to find solutions for unique problems.
So just out of curiosity, where are you right now?
I'm in Mexico. Ta-da!
Oh, Mexico. I was watching some of your videos, looking at your profile a little bit about your travel tips for working with your circadian rhythm. I was like, I love that you've changed the light bulbs to just fit a little bit better with your. I'd love to talk a little bit about that. Nice. Like it's worse the extra part in your suitcase. I would love to learn a little bit more about how you work with your humanness and your circadian rhythm while you're a digital nomad.
Yeah, so my lights, so you've seen the video, so you know the light bulb and then the motion detectors and my blue blockers. They're from basis of that. I've got methylene blue, and then I have a Lumati red as well. So this is a liposomal nanolized curcumin, which is also a photosensitizer, because cover your eyes when you actually have use a photosensitizer and then you use red light therapy, it supercharges the mitochondria. So I have a rule whereby I only fly into a place in the morning. If it's anything else, I break it up or whatever it is, because when you fly in at night, you don't know how hyped up you're going to be and all the rest of it. And then you can't sleep and then it just perpetuates it. But if you fly in the morning, like before 1 p.m. or 2 p.m., then you dump your bags because you can't usually check into a hotel and then you're out. And as you go out and interact and you have the sun on you and stuff, it starts to change your circadian rhythm because we have non-visual photoreceptors in our skin called opsins. And the opsins help to regulate the circadian rhythm because you have various timekeepers in the body, Zeitgebers they're called. So the main Zeitgeber is your SCN, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, right, which is taking in information, light information from the eyes. But the other Zeitgebers are your opsins in the skin and your digestive organs. So that's why if you consistently eat at like crazy times, your body starts to lose its circadian rhythm as well. So it's making sure that in the first 2 or 3 days, I'm eating exactly where I need to be eating in the time zone that I'm eating at. Or fast. There's no other way to it. You can't eat in the time zone you're in, hoping that you're going to be able to hit the ground running when you go to, from like, when I go from Sydney to London, for example, I have to start eating the destination time zone, and on planes I never eat. It's my opportunity to fast because when you're out of the Schumann residence, sorry, this isn't actually on my videos, I haven't posted this, but if you're outside of the Schumann resonance, which is that electromagnetic pole around like the very close to the outside of the Schumann resonance, your digestion is a little bit different. So I guess use your opportunity not to eat fast instead.
Yeah, I've read a little bit about like trying to shift your sleep schedule and before you go.
Yeah.
Is that possible? Or
Oh yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I will, I don't care about, or not don't care, but I don't use my blue blockers the night before I get on the plane. And I usually spend like that night staying up late and packing and that kind of stuff. So it depends on the flight times and all the rest of it. But when I'm meant to be up, I am trying to stay up on the flight, watching videos and that kind of stuff. But when I'm meant to be sleeping, I got it all on, like, making sure that I don't have any access to light and all that, because that's probably your biggest disruptor.
What do you say? I mean, it's really hard to sleep on planes these days. So what are your tips for, I don't know, getting easier to sleep?
I don't usually take melatonin because I'm sort of leaning towards that if you make it, you shouldn't take it type tribe. But I do use melatonin on flights. And because my body is so used to that kind of disruption, I don't really have problems falling asleep, to be honest with you. I only ever travel economy because I'm a tight ass. So it's nothing to do with life that bad.
Okay, I was going to pivot to a little bit about longevity. I read somewhere, I don't know if this is right, that our lifespan is increasing and then it was decreasing. I don't know if that's true.
So
Last year, what can we do? Oh, and then my follow-up question after the answer to that is like, what can we do individually? What are some lower effort things we can do every day to increase our longevity? And then what are some higher level things?
Well, so the statistic that you heard of is because last year was the first year that the American lifespan decreased for the first time in, I think, ever. And that is probably going to be reflected in the rest of the world in the next 5 to 6 years. I mean, it's also a possibility that we've hit that. You can't keep adding years on, right? Like at some point, the natural entropy of things means that it's going to stop. But it was the reversal and not the stabilization that was worrying everyone. Okay, so your question was about the sort of low-hanging fruit, and then, well, let's start with that, because low-hanging fruit is usually also known as fundamentals, and fundamentals are called fundamentals because they're fundamental. And so I really like it when we are able to, beat the same drum, because the fundamentals are always overlooked because they're not sexy. Right? It's considered like, oh, everybody knows that. What else have you got? Like, what else? What's the latest gadget? What's the latest supplement? But the fundamentals will take you 80% of the way, is if you get it right. And that's going to be appropriate sunshine, ambient light exposure, full spectrum sunlight exposure. It's going to be grounding, i.e. getting your barefoot on, grass and sand, but basically talking about nature and getting out there. There is something about it from not just that it's green and it's quiet, but also there is a frequency to nature. That is what we're lacking, because when we're in urban habitats, you are surrounded by concrete and other non-natural or synthetic materials, which is actually going to stop and change the wavelength of frequencies that come out from natural materials or from living beings and other people. It's your mindset and psychology and your emotions. I'll lump them together, but obviously they're different. But there is something to be said about the fact that the only place that you have to escape to really is here, your body, your mind, your heart. And so if that's not right, then trying to get comfort from the outside world is akin to, like band-aiding your sadness or your grief or your anger with cocaine and other things and alcohol, right? So you need to be able to find sanctuary within yourself. And for most of us, that's super difficult because we're so used to drawing help and love from others, right? Or from, these days, we're still social media. The other thing is breathing, and how you breathe makes such a difference. It is one of the only autonomic systems that we have. So autonomic systems related to the nervous system is something that you don't really control because it's automatic. Your heartbeat, whether your blood vessels dilate or not, whether your pupils dilate, that kind of stuff. But the heart rate is the only one that we actually really do have some control, like good control over. So you can trick your brain into thinking that you're not stressed if you breathe slowly. And you can trick your brain into thinking you are anxious by breathing quickly, by scrunching up your posture, right? You can trick your body into thinking that you're sad by doing that. I mean, this is broad strokes here. It's a lot more complicated than that, but that's the gist of it. So breathing's super important. The type of water that we're drinking is fundamental. I mean, we are mostly water, and all the fat that we have, the fat that lines our nerves in the brain, this the axons, that's 80% water. That's why fat floats, right? And we don't drink nearly enough appropriate quality, life-giving water. Most of the water that we're drinking is out of plastic bottles or out of council taps, which has been filtered and suffocated to within an inch of its life. And then we've had rubbish put into it, like fluoride and chloride in ridiculous amounts. And we call that clean. For water to get into a cell, there's actually an ionic exchange that needs to happen. And that means that you need minerals in your water. And we certainly are very mineral deficient now. And I think half my patients' problems, at least part of it, can fundamentally be solved just by drinking appropriately good quality, clean water. I think those are some of the low-hanging fruit. And then sort of the high-level thing. Oh, sleep! Did I say sleep? Anyway, sleep. Sleep is the only time. No, I lie. Sleep is the only major time that you can go into delta wave frequencies of the brain. And the delta wave, the slow wave sleep, is a cue for the lymphatic system, the aquaporins, to actually open up, and the cerebral spinal fluid to come through and wash out your brain, to clear out those toxic metabolites. And you get 3 shots of that a night. So if you are not having good sleep because you're stressed out, because you're drinking smart alcohol, because you're exposing yourself to excessive blue light at night, you're not going to be able to get into your slow wave sleep. You're not going to be able to clean out your brain. Okay, you get another chance of it tomorrow, or you might be a super meditator and be able to get to drop into delta waves. And that's like less than 0.5% of the population. So let's not use that as a possibility. Let's just try and get good sleep. High level stuff, look, I try and talk less and less about like the supplements and the adjuncts and the modalities and the gadgets, because I would hate to be part of that problem, which is that patients or client people feel that if they don't have the money, they're missing out. You're not missing out. Are they helpful? Sure. Can they open up bandwidth so that you can do more healing from within? Absolutely. But the majority, I swear, everything that you need is inherent in here. And so I kind of talk less and less about what we should be aspiring towards and for, because not everyone can afford that or ever will be able to afford those things, or will have the opportunities. And so let's stick to the fundamentals.
Can you give us a little breakdown of epigenetics and why it's so important and how it's sort of shaping the way we're viewing physical and mental health?
So what is epigenetics? Epigenetics means on top of the genome. So the DNA is full of information, and people for decades thought that our salvation was to be found in the genetic cells. However, genetics is literally just code that at some point needs to be decoded, translated, transcribed. And it's the epigenetics, your experiences, what you have, not just in your life, but intergenerationally as well, that is going to decide which parts of that code is actually translated into proteins. And then proteins form your white blood cells, form your immune cells, your antibodies, your muscles, your all the rest of it. So if you think of the human being, if you think of all animals as living, breathing, learning organisms that are in an environment that they have to interact with other animals and organisms that they have to interact with, you can see that this is a living, breathing ecosystem. An ecosystem will not survive unless it's able to adapt. And it adapts by taking in signals and not just changing the transcriptions for itself, but also changing the transcriptions for its offspring so that they have a better chance of surviving whatever issues they're facing. In the past, it would be, change to the atmosphere so there was more or less UV, more or less light. Be changes to the oxygen concentration in the environment. There would be famines and not as much food. And so the body learns because the body's trying to help you survive, not just you, but your offspring too, right? Generations after. So when there is a famine, like as demonstrated in the China famine study or the Dutch famine study, when there is a famine, the genes in your body, the epigenetics are like, we never want this to happen to us again. So we're going to get better at storing fat. And then before you know it, 2 or 3 generations later, their offspring are better at storing fat, especially when they're stressed. Because what's stress? You think of stress as being your boss yelling at you. You think of your stress as your dog breaking its leg. But the body inside produces epinephrine, norepinephrine, and cortisol. It's not norepinephrine in context of dog breaking its bone. It's not norepinephrine in context of boss yelling at you. It's norepinephrine, full stop in the story. So the cells see epinephrine, norepinephrine, and cortisol. And what does it do? It's like, well, 2 generations ago, there was a famine that nearly took us out. Don't you worry, fam, I got you. I'm going to make sure that we are not taken out of the gene pool. And you'll store fat better. So that's epigenetics.
I like to go back really quick to the types of water that would be better for us to consume. You don't have to say any brands or anything unless you want to. I mean, that's fine too. But just how can people improve the quality of water if you're, Westerner?
100%. Okay. So first of all, it's understanding what's in your water in the first place. I was spending some time in Cape Canaveral in Florida last year. And when I was there, I received not 1, but 2 separate letters from the council saying, whoopsies, we found XYZ chemical in your water. Don't worry about it. It's a little bit higher than it should be, but we're working on it. Don't sue. And I was floored. I don't even know what this chemical is. And at the end of the day, there are 2 types of people, right? There are the people who say, oh, don't be a fearmonger. And, you don't even know it's bad for you. And then the other type of person, which is me, is you need to prove that that's safe before you go ahead and let it loose in my water or tell me not to worry or whatever. So you got to know what's in your water. And there are different ways to test that. So it's not just the chemicals that are in there. It's also about understanding that the pipes that the water is coming through, maybe copper, maybe rusting, maybe whatever. We've got miles and miles of these pipes, right? The other thing is the additives that the council put in to basically kill any bacteria that might be there. So that's going to be your chlorines and stuff. Then it's to put the stuff in, which thankfully is now being phased out after decades of, more intuitive and clever doctors jumping up and down about things like fluoride. So chlorine and fluoride are both halogens, which means that there is evidence to show that they may displace iodine. And the iodine is super important for your thyroid, right? So we have to also be aware what might be in our water and how is it going to affect us. Because I'll tell you now, I mean, now that the cat's out of the bag about fluoride, we're fine. But even just like 5 years ago, when people still didn't think that fluoride was a problem in our water, they didn't, if you ask them, okay, show me the evidence with how much fluoride a baby can tolerate, there's no evidence for that because you can't do those kind of studies. But what do you think you're mixing your baby formula with? Water with fluoride in it. And you're feeding that baby liters of this a week. You don't think it's going to affect its brain function? Fluoride is neurotoxic. Like, that's a known thing. I'm going off track. Okay. The other thing is, try not to drink out of plastic bottles at all. Even plastic bottles which aren't left in the sun, which aren't heated up, you can still find microplastics in the water. There was a study that came out late last year, 2024, that showed in autopsy that the human brain is now, in the autopsy specimens, that the human brain is 0.5% plastics, microplastics now by weight. And so where do you think we're getting it from? We're getting it from our environment. And there are plenty of things that you can't control. So why not double down on the things that you can control? For heaven's sake, get rid of all the stuff that your plastic containers, your plastic clothes, like all your Lululemons and all the rest of it, like they need to go. Because there was a study in dogs actually a few years ago. Don't ask me who came up with this study, but anyway, they put polyester pants on female dogs and their fertility dropped. And it was reversed when they took the polyester pants off after a few weeks. So it's not insignificant. The reason why nano and micro make a difference is because when it comes to hormones, you really don't need that much to make a difference. I read a book once called Our Solar and Future, and they were trying to express vehemently about how impactful endocrine disrupting chemicals were in our environment by giving an example of estrogen. In 2 tank cards of water, and I'm sure that this is completely up, but I remember being completely blown away with the size and scale. 2 massive tankards of water, you need 1 drop of estrogen to affect the system. And every microplastic, every microplastic, every PFAS, every BPA, every one of these forever chemicals is an endocrine disruptor. There is a reason why male fertility rates in particular, and male sperm motility and all the rest of it has declined sharply, scarily, in the last 30 plus years, is precisely because of all this. And because we're not able to pin the tail on the donkey, that's why the government has been slow to move. It's like, well, you prove it's that. It's not just that. It's that plus this, plus this, da, 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 da. So how do you design a study like that? But that's an acceptable level. No, it's an acceptable level for one person, a 70-kilo man. That's not an acceptable amount of fluoride for a baby, for example. Like, there are all these counter arguments, and people just, they're too much in there. Prove it's wrong before I make changes. No, prove it's safe, please. Because look at all the problems we're having now with sunscreen. No. Okay.
I know, I feel like I could talk to you for like an hour, but I want to be respectful of your time. And just one final question of, like, the clothes thing, I think is really relevant right now. I've been seeing some of that online. How can we choose the right clothes that are not going to be endocrine disruptors?
So it's always going to be your natural linens. And to be honest with you, the natural linens are your cottons and your linen, and not, there was a paper, I don't know how robust this paper is, but the paper did come out, and it was talking about the frequency of certain fabrics. Now, what is frequency? Because the word frequency sounds a bit very woo-woo, right? Everything in nature has got a electron spin, right? Which means that the number of electrons and neutrons and protons that are involved in that molecule and how those molecules are bound together is actually going to determine the energy around it, and that's called a frequency, which you can test. Like, this is not, I think it's obviously used too loosely in too many contexts, some not scientific, but it is absolutely true that everything produces a frequency. So this particular paper was talking about the frequency of certain types of materials that make, fabrics and clothes and what have you. And the frequencies that were the most harmonious with our body was the cottons and the linens, and surprisingly not silk, which is a natural material. And I don't know, maybe it's the cries and deaths of a million silkworms. I don't know, I'm not sure. But apart from that, it's choosing those natural materials. And of course, we're looking for organic, we're looking for safe dyes, we're looking for, ethical production. And I'll tell you now, like, that's not something that preoccupies my day, but it is something at some point that I have to get serious about as well, because there are only so many things that we can put our attention on. But if our intention is that at some point we will get around to it, then we will get around to it. But if we have no intention, then we'll never get around to it. And that is just another hole that we just put a plug, which we didn't. Like, it took me, I only started using fluoride-free toothpaste in the last 8 years or so. So that means that before that, even knowing that there's this fluoride thing maybe in the dyes and the chemicals in toothpaste, like, it means that before 8 years ago, I was using rubbish toothpaste that was bad for my health in an area of my mouth, which is a massive guardian site with all its mucous membranes and so close to my brain. Come on. But we can only do what we can when we can, things with tools that we have, right, in situations that we're under.